Hey everyone, I'm Kolanjinga. Welcome to that Rugby Union Show, and it's on to the next episode. I'm, as you can well see, not in the studio today. I'm in a hotel. In fact, I'm at Sun City for the launch and the announcement of something rugby related, so look out for it. Hopefully you'll see it on the roundabout. It is a little bit different. Hopefully the gremlins aren't going to attack us and ruin the day, because we've got plenty to talk about. And the focus, as you will have seen on the thumbnail, is SOS, Save Our Scrums. That is the focus. It's all about the pack and seemingly World Rugby wanting to change the rules of rugby union to make them more akin to rugby league. What's that about? Well, we've roped in an expert, somebody who knows all about the dark arts, somebody who in his own right is a legendary scrummager and a Springbok, and very glad to call him my friend Robbi Kempson, joining us from Quebec. Kempo, so good to see you, my brother. First things first, how are things in the EC?
Oh, awesome. Thank you very much, Gola. They're wonderful. Things are going very well here. Family's happy, everyone's settled in. Working at Grey High School, which I'm very privileged to be doing, and really enjoying life here. Thanks, my friend.
Yeah, I find that fascinating, the movement of coaches from professional to schools, junior rugby, back up again, back down again. In terms of experience, what do you find, I suppose, most fulfilling? What would your preference be?
No, without a doubt, schoolboy rugby is the most rewarding thing anyone can do. I'm fortunate. I don't coach the first team. I luckily have a very strong coaching team that looks after that. But I'm fortunate to coach from under 14Es all the way to first team, and just the response of the boys and seeing how they react to the different coaches, the different coaching styles throughout the age groups. It's the most rewarding thing anyone can do. Absolutely, there's not even a question. And it's not about being an elite rugby player. I mean, yes, there are those in the first team that want to be elite players, but it's about absolutely everyone in 350 players that we have. And again, just seeing them progress from one age group to the next, and how they develop. And yeah, some are always destined, unfortunately, to be the C and D guys, but the support of the A and B team players is just, and what they give to those youngsters as well. It's just so fulfilling to watch and see how these kids progress.
Yeah, I've loved your rugby journey, because I think a lot of your focus over the years has been on juniors, even for the various unions, particularly in the Eastern Cape. So you certainly seem to have a knack for teaching young men, and I think it's commendable. But before we get into your coaching journey, let's start with your rugby journey, because it is very positional today. What we're looking at, scrums and where the world is headed, but when did you discover that you are a decent scrummager? Like, what ages were we talking about, and where were you? Because I think you were in the Eastern Cape.
Yeah, I was at Queen's College. Both my brothers, listen, I'm the youngest of four, so I was completely bullied. They also, I was disciplined from an early age. So yeah, I was quite a tubby young chap when I first arrived in life, and prop was the natural position where my coaches put me. And both my brothers played prop at an early age, and then my one grew and moved to lock. But certainly, my brothers first disciplined me, and from there, I took to playing prop. I played both sides of the scrum throughout school, and yeah, it was kind of a natural progression from there into life after school as well.
Yeah, I got to meet the Kempson brothers, but the one thing you won't mention is that you're bigger than them now. So the discipline has probably have to come to an end. But the one thing that always fascinated me, Robbie, and I suppose when you consider what it is you're involved in now, teaching youngsters and creating better human beings ultimately, is that you yourself were a well-rounded lad. And I love that. I love that our lives are not linear, that you're not just a jock, or you're not just an artist, or you're not just an academic. And I think that's one of the things that I completely drew me towards you. And a lot of people don't know, but you've got a bit of a musical streak.
As do you, Carla. Drakensberg choir and all. Yeah, no. Well, I attempted to play the piano through most of the grades. Got to about grade 3.5, and then grade 4, unfortunately, rugby took over. Almost joined you at Drakensberg's boys choir, but rugby is kind of a
Would have
more
been a
important.
disaster. Would have been a disaster, brother.
Absolutely. Well, knowing you after that, yes, absolutely. But yeah, no. So I think we're unfortunate. I'm in a space. I'll give you a great instance. Our under 16A captain is, he plays the horn in the orchestra. Here at Grey, our vice captain for our first team is actually the conductor of the Grey High School Orchestra. So the mediums, from what I grew up, thankfully, where my mother forced music upon me, and that type of cultural experience very much is alive in the school that I'm involved in right now at Grey High School.
So then rugby became the thing, and it does grip us all at some stage, and we decide that we're going to take this thing seriously. How old were you? And you were one of the youngsters in the first team ultimately, weren't you?
Yeah, listen, my baptism of fire is my second game. I was just turned 16 actually. I was against Oosterrand. Which
Yeah.
was an interesting affair. Listen, I was fairly feisty, even as a youngster. I was a redhead or ginger, as some of us call each other. But I started very early. I started just as I hit grade 10, so to speak. In those days, you can't do it now. But my game against Oosterrand was interesting because my first action wasn't exactly to scrum; it was to do something else, which aggravated us. Probably a
You're
wrong
not
thing
going
to
to
do
tell
to
us
a
what
man
it is you did to us.
Well, listen, to aggravate a man of that size at that young age was probably the wrong thing to do, but it all ended well, to be honest with you. We're still friends today, which doesn't matter. So, no, so I started quite, as I said, at junior school. I sort of looked up to one of my older brothers as a tight head prop. Wanted to play both sides my whole life. And then I had a gentleman called Dirk Moret, who was my coach at that stage, who was a prop forward in his time. And he really almost fashioned the way I wanted to go throughout my career going forward. I didn't really think of professional rugby early on, but certainly, when I got with Mr. Moret and the way he just looked after me and my progression through, as a grade 10 going to grade 12 as a front row forward, I thought, perhaps this is something I should give it a try.
Yeah, it's very difficult to adapt to playing in the front row at that very young age when the bones aren't settled, you're still growing. What advice do you give your youngsters who are keen on playing in the front row? We saw Steven Kitsoff retiring not too long ago. He was one of the rare exceptions who I think at under 19 was allowed to play senior or open side rugby. Generally, they don't want to see youngsters do that. How do you blood youngsters into that position?
Yeah, well, I think it's difficult, to be honest. And I know Steven started early. I started 19 as well. I started playing for the Sharks. My first captain was Val Bartman. And now, listen, I don't regret absolutely anything that happened in my career from start to finish. I was very privileged to have the opportunity. So, but no, your bones aren't fully developed. It doesn't matter if you Afrikaans or English. Your body is not meant for the attrition that an adult can have at that age. So, Stephen has the unfortunate, has to retire, and his, potential injury was very serious, or could have been very serious, and thankfully they caught it in time. But no, I think the gradual progression from or through the age groups, I think South African rugby and world rugby got it right, of how they're doing the scrum sequence, the crouch, touch, bind, engage, the stability, and everything else that goes with it. And I think that progression up into under 20s, when it becomes a bit more full on, as opposed to the 1.5 meters at schoolboy rugby, and from there on to senior rugby. I think there are very few rare talents like a Kitsoff in this day and age that will go from school into professional rugby. I think it's that time potentially has come and gone. Just in view of the fact, and I'm talking more specifically about South African rugby, You even look at English rugby and the way the under-20s are going. The size of the human that we're now developing. I mean, I played at 105 to 108. These kids are 125 to 130.
Yeah.
It's a different category you're dealing with. And I think the progression, particularly of our youngsters, from schoolboy into under-20s into professional rugby, I think it's a better pathway. I think, if you're playing professional rugby as a tight head prop by the age of 23, I think you've done an exceptional job. If you're playing loose head, potentially start earlier, but to hit your straps at the age of 19, I don't think there are too many players in world rugby right now, whether it doesn't matter whether it's us or England or everywhere else, to have that opportunity. I don't think really exists, considering the development of the game in general and the conditioning of the players in general, and just the experience of the 2 or 3 year experience of a professional rugby player compared to a guy coming out of school makes a massive difference. I mean, I was probably fortunate. I played Rovers, I played club rugby when I came out of school. So I played against, second team, I played first team, I played under 20s as well at the same time. But I was fortunate, I was learning the whole time through those structures against older men, against very solid and very good older men, Natal Sharks players at the time. A guy like Guy Kebble comes to mind. So, and I don't think those learning experiences are the same for our youngsters at the time. And it's just in view of the fact that they don't get the opportunity to play those old coaches anymore, which probably can be a good thing sometimes, because you learn some very harsh lessons if you get things wrong.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I think we are missing a beat when it comes to the importance of club rugby. I played club rugby as well, and the guy opposite me, I could have called him for that matter, but being able to navigate those, learn the lessons, take a couple of knocks, I think is incredibly important in terms of learning. I see we've got a couple of people who are on. If you have any questions, do drop them below, and I'll pass them on to Robbi. Love to hear from you and what you think and what you'd like to hear answered. And please, again, share, and do subscribe. We want to get up to 2,000 subscribers as fast as possible. But you played, Robbi, in the time where people kicked very heavy leather balls, and you were a pretty decent place kicker at school, and wore incredibly heavy rugby jerseys. Things have changed substantially. Where was your first contract, and from there, your journey overseas to retirement?
Okay, well, this might surprise people. My very first contract was with the Sharks, but it was for a full 18,000 Rand per annum, which I think most kids go in per month these years. So, no, listen, my dad was from Natal. The only thing I wanted to do after school was go and play for the Sharks. It was my dream to play for them, in view of the fact because of him. And I had the opportunity to go to Rovers, very strong club at the time. Had the likes of Errol Stewart, Henry Honeyball, amongst others. Jeremy Thompson, a good mate of mine, playing for them. Sean Platford. I don't know if most people won't even remember the names I mentioned. But I was very fortunate.
The Banana Boys fans will.
Yeah, no, they all know. But I mean, club rugby was so healthy at the time. We played against the Crusaders. You played against the Hugh Edwards, amongst others. You played against the Vol Bartman. That was club rugby back then, which today is provincial rugby. Almost URC level. So I was very fortunate to go into an environment where I was able to succeed. I played. My first hooker, Cliffy Ekbrink, was also slightly volatile at Rovers. Not as volatile as John Allen, but certainly up there. These older lads kind of taught you the ropes, and also in view of the way rugby was played back then, a bit of protection when you get into, you talk about the dark arts. There were plenty of dark arts back in those days. But yeah, I think growing up and having the privilege of growing up in that environment of these older players that really just gave you the ability to perform underneath them. I mean, my Rovers captain was Gary Teichmann. You couldn't ask for a better leader ever in any game of rugby that you play. So no, I was really fortunate to go through a system in the Sharks environment where I played under 20s, managed to get into the first team, And yeah, my time at the Sharks was absolutely invaluable to the rest of my career.
Right. And, I think this is exactly starting to get to the meat, because I want to delve into the evolution of the scrum, why we find ourselves where we find ourselves. How different is it, scrummaging, from when you played? And I'm glad you mentioned those names, because I immediately go back to the types of videos and Curry Cups in the 90s and Ian McIntosh's team, Bose van der Vestes. And so I can picture the type of rugby that we saw, the type of scrums that we saw, where the ball comes in, it's, in and out. It might collapse, it might not. It doesn't matter. The game moves on. How much progression has there been in the development of scrums?
Oh, it's been massive. It's the safety as it is today. It was unheard of back then. The ability to have an injury in the current format as we are, I think is almost negligible unless something's doing something incredibly illegal. So back then it was. I remember the Curry Cup final playing against. When we played against. Gee, I can't remember back then. It's 95 against the Western Province. It literally was. I think Ian Rogers, the late Ian Rogers, was the referee. You'd make a mark and you'd go, 5-6 meters back and go scrum, and literally
Go.
we'd stand 2.5 meters away and we'd charge each other, and whoever got the advantage was fantastic. As you're right, if it went down, no one cared. If it went backwards or forwards, it kind of was, fight your fight. So going from that to where rugby is right now, there's, from a safety perspective, is just next level. Was it fun? Yes, it was incredibly fun. I think as things changed, as my career progressed as well, the type of person you played against changed as well. Your 160 kilogram prop, which I unfortunately played in my second game against Northern Transvaal against, they didn't manage to fit into the new type of rugby. So we didn't have to push against those type of individual. But then your sort of next part came in. You now fitter, you're stronger, you're more explosive. And I think in the time when I was playing and the progression of it, it led to not necessarily more mobile props, but certainly more explosive props. I think of a guy like Ollie Leroux, incredibly explosive gentleman. Probably, people go back and actually watch the way he played. I don't think anyone can even mirror what he used to do on a rugby field today, what he did back then. I think he was an incredible athlete and what he could do, at the size of the human that he was. So, no, it really has changed to now where it's very much a set way and a safety way in which these players do things. And I think the most important thing about the scrum, and I'll probably say this more than once in this conversation, it's the only place in rugby today that is a one-on-one contest. If you look at your defensive alignments, your fly-offs don't charge on fly-offs, your centres don't charge on centres. But maybe at the breakdown, you have both your sixes having a scrap for the ball, but you're having a front row forwards, three of these beasts really just arguing with each other on a consistent basis throughout the game, with a referee that knows little about the instruction of it, and trying to control these individuals with all these 6 different minds. So it is, it's a complex situation for a referee to be in, but certainly, to take away that aspect from any rugby game would certainly it would depower and devalue rugby as a whole as it is.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true that the athleticism of the front rowers has changed, but also the rest of the pack. Are the locks now more involved in the scrumming process? Are the loose forwards more involved? Because it kind of feels to me like back in the day and in the times that you played in before, that it was all about the size of your tight head prop. It was all about the strength of your loosey. No one really thought about the importance of the 2 locks behind it, and the loose forwards also adding their technique rather than just weight to the scrum.
Yeah, Colin, not glad you said that. I can name and shame quite a few gentlemen with regards to this. No, listen, the only thing I really worried about, I just wanted my lock with me. And again, I played with a guy, Mark Andrews, who was just unbelievable behind me. And literally at that, when I was playing with Wayne Five, he was the open side flank at the time. I'd just say to Fives, you know what, don't bother pushing. I've got Mark. You carry on, do whatever you have to do. Pretty much the same when I played for the Stormers. I'd say to Cornet Cricker, mate, you're wasting your time with your 50 kilograms pushing on me. Let me rather have the force from behind from the lock. So that definitely has changed. I think, when you have packs in excess now of 900 kilograms and you lose 105 kilograms of one of your loose forwards, it makes a big difference. Just the way the scrums are set up, the way the weight is transferred, the amount of impact on that small engage, it's not even 6 inches, and just the power that's manipulated from, the back five, as we call them, through the front row forwards. No, it's a very different kettle of fish to our days when I said, go hunt the breakdown and I'll look after the scrum. Yeah. I think it's a very different aspect.
Does that explain then this dominance that South African rugby seems to have? Because you touched on the fact that things have been very standardized in terms of the way in which teams are expected to scrum, mostly. But then the athleticism of the back five, as you say, in South Africa, we have a lot of options at lock. We have a lot of options at loose forward, particularly. Is this part of the reason the Springboks have become so adept? And I say the Springboks, but I think of the Sharks in the URC, very dominant scrum. The Stormers also have a very strong scrum. The Bulls might as well be a test scrum.
Listen, Colin, I think we're blessed with a few things in South Africa. We're blessed with tight head props. And listen, Mr. Malherbe himself is just, I think that gem of a human that we've had at tight head for South Africa, he cannot be replaced. And if we look for the next 50 years and rugby maintains what we have right now, I don't think we'll get another Frans Malherbe with regards to what he does for a Springbok side and a Stormer side or whatever side he plays for. Yes, we do have a lot of depth with regards to tight head props and loose head props. And I must give a hats off. Don's the second best scrum coach in the country. And he's done an incredible job. No, sorry, I tell him this frequently, but he never believed But Don has done an incredible job. Not just, the way Francis developed, the way Kitsoff has developed under him, but the depth below those two stalwarts, as we can now call them. What Don has done there is absolutely incredible. He's managed to almost plug holes when the injury arrives and it comes, and a guy like Kitsoff leaves a massive void. And already we're starting to see an Oxen chair can fill the void. A few other players, you talked about the Bulls, you talked about Mchunu that's coming through from the Sharks. And all these players, yes, they're provincialized or franchised, but ultimately fall underneath Don Newman. And I think what he has managed to, and the way he has managed to particularly condition these props, get them to buy into the ability to force the scrum penalties and turnovers, introduce a bomb squad, which is very difficult to do at most levels of rugby, and get them to, I'm talking about a new front row coming on, and get them to perform at international level consistently where we are dominating set pieces. I think a lot of kudos need to go to Mr. Human and Don, more than, not just the individuals themselves, but he has put an incredible amount of work into ensuring that we have that almost access of available loose head and tight head props. And let's not forget the hookers, they're fairly important as well. But he has really built a cornerstone of what we've achieved a lot. I mean, Rassie has done the entire framework and put everything together. Don is a vital cog of that entire process.
And probably crucial to that is that he's part of this Moby unit that SA Rugby has set up. So standardizing, I suppose, scrummaging across the different teams, the different franchises. Does that explain why there's such a good spread of solid scrums? So, whether you're in Cape Town, Durban, whether you're in Pretoria, the team that you're going to run up against on that field, they seem to do certain fundamentals well. Do you think that is why we've moved on from having big, burly forwards to forwards that actually dominate?
Without a doubt. I don't know if anyone's, I mean, surely the guys out that are watching this have watched, I mean, I watch on Instagram some of the things Don does with regards to the training of certain players and the way he does things. I mean, he's absolutely ruthless. This player thinks he's fatigued to a point where he must now rest, and Don goes, no, I want a bit more. And you get the other scrum guys involved. You get a Werner Krier that's now involved with the Bulls. You get a number of others involved in other franchises, ex-props that are getting involved in the process of it. But I think more importantly, they've all bought into what Don's already achieved from what he's done over the past couple of years. Wilco Low is not a surprise factor for me because I know he's been working with the Don Human. He's been working with the Werner Krier. So he's got all that input and the information that they need for them to excel at a very high level. You see lads coming back from Saracens, which is probably one of the premier clubs in world rugby, and all of a sudden they're dominating the Shark Scrum. So I think what Rassie and Don and whatever they've done with regards to the front row aspect and the way that they've produced the front row aspect into South African rugby, you can't fault anything they've done. They've done an exceptional job. They are by far the world leaders when it comes to forming a scrum, the scrum formation, the bomb squad that goes with it. It's really we all understand it's at the next level because we watch it week in, week out when we play our international games. But I don't think people understand the amount of effort that actually goes into collectively getting 8 people doing the same thing at the same time to produce a force of power that our Springbok scrum does on a consistent basis. It's not an easy job.
Yeah, because when you can establish that platform at the scrum, it not only becomes a manner of restarting the game like a line-out, it's an actual weapon. And I think that's what Rassie's done so well. We've also seen it backfire a bit. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, and maybe I'm being a hypercritical, and Jake will be angry with me for saying this, Bulls, fantastic scrum, win all the penalties, but you got to put away the points. We saw the Sharks do something similar, I think, 2 weeks ago. Really dominant scrum, but then you need to also score the tries out wide. And I think a dominant scrum, and this is what we're experiencing as South African rugby fans, is when the Boks are firing, that is a weapon, and it is a way to score points.
Yeah, listen, I think it's a domino effect. So with a strong set piece, and we talk about the scrum first up, once you get that penalty, what happens next? So do you take the points, or no, do you put the knife in and go for the corner? So if you don't double up with a very competent maul, which these days are quite effectively retained with regards to the way people set up, if you don't have a dominant maul with a dominant scrum and you're not taking the points on hand, it kind of has a counteractive effect like you saw with the Bulls and particularly Leinster against the Sharks. If you're not dominating 2 out of the 3 set pieces, I'll say 3 scrum, lineouts and kickoffs, and you're missing a trick. So, to add on to, yes, you have a dominant scrum, but as soon as we have a dominant scrum, we get in the penalty, get the advantage. First thing we do is kick the corner. You've got to get a result out of that corner, whether it's the 3 points or the 7 points is regardless. If you don't get a result out of that, which we found in the URC, the dominant scrum, as you said, almost becomes a negating factor with regards to the actual outcome of the game. So it's how you utilize strength and the strengths of your set piece. Where I think the balance we have with the Springbok side is that if an Evans playing or an Archie is playing, it doesn't matter. The dominance of our driving maul is going to be as much as it is of the current scrum effort that we have. So we're always going to get an outcome, and that's always what you want from a penalty or penalisable offence. You want an outcome, whether it's relief from your 22, getting to the other person's half, or it's the fact that you're actually going to be putting scoreboard pressure on the opposition. You've got to have almost a dual role. It can't be a singular as opposed to being something that's more progressive in what you're trying to achieve in the game.
So now that we've established the importance of the scrum, the importance of a dominant scrum like the Springboks have under Don Heeman produced, Why are World Rugby seemingly wanting to water this down, Kempo? Because last year, 2024, they came up with a couple of law amendments, mostly based around rugby in the United States. And I understand why you do that. You want to go to a lesser, in inverted commas, market, test out the laws and the new variations and see how it translates. But it seems to me like we're trying to create rugby league. Like we want to negate the bomb squad and the impact of big, strong, dominant forwards, and at the same time trying to negate the impact that the scrum has on the game.
Yeah, Tola, I can't understand it, to be honest with you. As soon as we lose the scrum, we lose the ability, we lose rugby union in its totality, to be honest with you. So I can't see the depowering of the scrum at an international level ever happening. If it does, I think rugby as we know it will become obsolete. We've seen the French now go with a 7-1 split. They understand, just how good, a strong dominant forward pack can be. And you look at, if you talk about them, the rugby league, so to speak, in America, they talk about the poor Canadians being woke. I mean, Trump's trying to make America great again, and they're trying to destroy rugby at the same time. So,
Trying to weaken the scrum as well.
I think, yeah. So no, listen. If I look at their rugby and the situation that they have, they don't have many good props. They don't have the sort of coaching props have throughout world rugby, as opposed to just the isolation of America. And they potentially don't have the professionalism of how to coach a scrum in a certain area and how to manipulate how a scrum can work. I understand them doing it in the minor leagues, because how else do you grow the game? Probably a good thing perhaps to do it, but I think as soon as, we do something very similar in the South African context. Our scrums are very depowered in underage groups, and it gets stronger and stronger as we go up.
Sure.
But certainly from to de-water the scrum in an international level, or even at a URC level, and a level below that, let's go to Curry Cup. No, the hybrid style definitely won't work. It won't entertain anyone. Everyone still, yes, I know a guy like Joel Scranton gets bored when we have a reset scrum, but still, listen, when you have a brutal scrum against another scrum and it works, this crowd at Twickenham still goes crazy. The crowd at Ellis Park goes crazy. You go to the Viva Stadium, they're still going crazy because the Tag Furlong's got their boys on the front foot's got a penalty. That one-on-one brutality is probably the nicest word to say if you're talking about the woke environment.
But it's a battle. It's a tussle.
It's a tussle. It's a battle. You're fronting 8 against 8, and you're wanting dominance in some way or form. Just like you want dominance as it goes to a breakdown era, just as you want dominance when it goes to continuity of your game or your counter-attacking ability. All these facets that Ireland kind of tick the boxes. And I think what will be interesting in watching the British Irish Lions and what's selected for the British Irish Lions, and I can pretty much guarantee you they're going to go very forward heavy, very much focused on set piece dominance, and they'll do exactly what Rassie's done. They'll hit the sixes when it comes to the back end of the game, but they are going to dominate the opposition up front first. And if you look at the British Irish Lions and the collective that they have, that's kind of, if you get outside of a Springbok environment, that's as elite as you can get in World Rugby, as opposed to winning a World Cup. You're picking all these nations together, probably the best of the best within the grass of the Northern Hemisphere, and you're taking on a Southern Hemisphere team, just to see how they go about things. And as I said, they're pretty sure they'll be very dominant, heavy with regards to the way Farrell goes about it. I don't see rugby with that aspect. Yes, they're trialing these laws. They've tried a lot of laws along the way with regards, particularly depowering the scrum. If World Rugby ever really thought honestly about it, their biggest league and the most financially equitable league, which is the French league, they're not going to buy into it. I think you're going to see a lot of breakaways happening pretty quickly. And even now, if you look at Ireland is producing a lot more tight-head props, tight-head and loose-head props. England have, if you look at their substructure below, just where their test side is right now, they've got Fujo coming through, a number of excellent loosehead and tighthead props coming through. So I can see where they're going with the trial laws. I understand where it's coming from a American perspective. I
Yeah.
don't see it happening in rugby very quickly, or world rugby.
Yeah.
Again, if it does, we're playing a different game.
Yeah, I've got a long-suffering Welshman in the background listening in on the conversation, and I'm sure he's got those laws for me, and we can just take a quick look at them. We don't have to delve into too much depth, and these are the ones that were spoken about last year, towards the end of last year, and these are trial laws, so this is not necessarily going to be applied anywhere else, but, removing the scrum as an option on knock-ons or a throw, that just tells me you want fewer of them. And I suppose, Kempo, when you look at all of these, it's that thing that I always constantly keep heard said, and I don't necessarily agree with it. And what I constantly kept hearing is that we want more ball in play. Do we want more ball in play? Or is it about the tussle across the field, across the positions, in the set piece, in the loose? Does rugby need more ball in play?
Well, let's go down to grassroots level. So you've got a 125 kilogram, 15-year-old. Where does he play? Well, he can't play the game anymore because there are no scrums. And you're now playing this expansive game and rugby's always been about inclusive, about everyone. So suddenly you're actually discarding a large element of the guys that actually want to play rugby. So no, listen, I understand the ball in play aspect. I kind of disagree with that, to be honest with you. I think if you look at some of the games that are played, particularly URC level, some of the Springbok games that are played, the ball in play is quite substantial with regards to the way things go. There are a few that I agree with, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't say depowering the scrum with the free kick can't be another scrum. I think that we manipulated that law a little bit, and obviously World Rugby were totally upset with it, so they changed the law. But I don't think. Yes, it might speed up the game, but now Eddie Jones spoke about hybrid players 5 years ago. If you want to have hybrid players across the board, you're going to have more injuries. You're going to have more impacts. You're going to have higher impacts, higher velocity of impacts, and you're going to have less downtime for the players to actually rest. And when you come back to what some of the northern nations have mentioned about limiting the amount of reserves that come on the field, well, it's already been scientifically proven that the substitutions come on the field actually limit the amount of injuries in view of the fact that there are fresh legs making better decisions. So they kind of knocked that to the wayside. So no, I think from the aspect of depowering the scrum, yes, I think they are doing. I don't think it's specifically aimed at South African rugby, to be honest with you. I think it's more aimed at the bigger picture. They want a spectacle. What do what does the new viewer want? What do you want to see? Well, the old viewer that pays for everything at the moment, I'm talking about worldwide with regards to TV rights, etc. They kind of want to see the scrum. Until that dynamic changes, which may happen over the next 10 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 20 years, I think you're going to have a lot of very upset scrum coaches that are going to lose their jobs over a period of time. And I think you depower the scrum. If we go anywhere near league, rugby union as we know it, we can forget about.
I understand the why, especially when you put it like that. New markets, a more exciting, more fluid looking game. But I always believe that's what Sevens was for. Sevens was for a look in, for an outsider, a look into this game, the exciting elements, the speed elements, the running, the tries, and tens as well also is a platform for that. We can't change all cricket to T20, and I don't know if we want to do the same with rugby.
Paul, I think you've got it absolutely spot on. I understand the American markets. If you watch American football, listen, the impacts, when they have the scrimmages are just as much as hitting a scrum. So, to depower a game they don't understand, let's be very frank and honest. Majority of your guys that can't make it in coaching in the major rugby league. And so that's not to be unfair to them, but they're not getting the specialized coaching of a Don Human on a consistent basis, which you would think that if they had, the ability to have scrumming prize throughout their league and their clubs would be a lot stronger. As does, Ireland do exactly the same as Don does here in South Africa. England have a very similar situation, which they do throughout. In fact, they have a front row club that's run by ex-players that actually looks at all the front row forwards within the English system. So, I don't think that's going to be diminished anytime soon. Again, understand the market that America is in, and how do they make it more exciting for the local viewer. I can understand that. To make it more exciting for a South African viewer when they actually want to see a Francois Herber putting one over his opposition, I think it's going to be a difficult sell.
Yeah, look, I watched the Bulls win a penalty after the final hoot. David Creel steps up, slots a kick, wins the game. So you can't tell me that there's no excitement at all to watching scrums. Like I refuse to believe that, and they still play a very crucial and pivotal part. Kempo, you mentioned the British and Irish Lions, and I want to do a standalone show where we talk about that, and also from an Australian perspective, because it's looking very, very bad at the moment for the Wallabies. But let's look at the Springboks, and you spoke about the depth that the likes of Dan Niemann have gone on to create. And I must thank John Cardinelli for putting together this graphic, and he did it on Twitter, or X, I suppose it's called now. And it's a bit of a depth chart. And these are the guys who were called up or into Rassie's first alignment camp. If you can see that chart, I don't know if you can see it up close, but there are a couple of names. On the Lucid side, we've got Ox, Gerard Steenkamp, Jan Hendrik Wessels, the Bulls guys, and Tutuko Mchunu, who's gone very well. And then seemingly more tight head props who were pulled in. I suppose that speaks to Trevor Nyakane is there in red, but I think his injury will preclude him for the next couple of months. But it looks like quite a bit of depth. Would you be worried about the names you see there, the age profile, or are we looking decent for the next World Cup? And I'm talking about the entire cycle.
No. Listen, I think we're in good hands there, to be honest with you. I know Trevor's still injured. France hopefully can get over the injury he has. Vincent Koch's been unbelievable for the Sharks. He's leaps and bounds from where he was at Saracens. Wilco Lowe, there's nothing. Wilco potentially France is out first choice. Thomas de Toy is doing unbelievable things at Bath.
He is scoring a try a game. What is happening?
Unleashed, he's not a prop, actually. He must be something else. That never happens. Listen, Neertland Forshey is also very special. He's also getting a bit long in the tooth, but he's done an exceptional job for the Stormers. And Klabakanya, really, I think he's the mold on exactly what I'm talking about. Get rid of the scrums. There's one asset of a player who's unbelievable. He's a captain. He's a leader. He puts everything on the field at once. He doesn't look like the likely sort of loose forward that you want out there, but he's an exceptional player when it comes to. So, to lose a guy like that in a rugby system or rugby ecosystem, I think would be completely unfair. If you go through the hookers, listen, Malcolm Marx and Bongi, you're obvious to everyone underneath that. And you can't even go, hang on, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. And then you go through it's, listen, they've all proved themselves to a greater or lesser degree. Oxenchair, probably number one, and first and foremost. Steenkamp's done exceptionally well. Vessels has done well. Mchunu's still learning the ropes, but also he's a great prospect. Just the way he uses the ball in play and what he does, off the ball. Again, but if you go into any match that we play this season and you've got an Ox, Bongi of France, or you've got a Gerard, a Malcolm, and a Vincent, add a Walker Lowe to the mix, add a Cross to the mix, had a Fenter to the mix. I don't think anyone can complain or argue that we've got a world-class system of front row forwards that can dominate any other pack out there. And I don't think there's any exclusion to that clause, to be honest with you. Even Ireland at full strength, firing at all cylinders. I see a South African pack with your top three of those front rows certainly dominating.
The only one that I'm slightly worried about in terms of position is at hooker. And I say that with a big sort of asterisk next to it, because you mentioned the guys who are coming through, and Andre Finta is, I think, phenomenal and one for the future. And there's quite a bit of depth. But I would understand that Rassie would try and create that depth, because if I look at the age of Bongi, of Malcolm, Akker van der Merwe, these guys are in their 30s. I do think that the longevity of professional players has changed substantially over the last few years, but they might not be around for the next World Cup.
No, I think, let's be frank. No, you're absolutely right. Let's be frank. You've got an Evan Etzebeth, you've got a France, you've got a Vincent, you've got a Bongi. Stevens unfortunately had to retire. How many, 34 to 35-year-olds, you've got Sia. How many of these guys can you actually take to a World Cup and think that you can perform at that level? Rassie probably has an answer for us already, but if you're taking 6 or 7 of those and they're in a position where, let's be honest, right now we're looking at Eben Etzebeth that hasn't played a bit of rugby for quite a period of time. They're not guys that are going to recover from injuries in the following week. They're guys that are going to need a period of time to recover from a niggle, so to speak, over a period of time. So you're absolutely spot on. So, but from that, if if a France doesn't make it and a Vincent does, I think we're absolutely fine. Tommy du Toit makes it and a Wilco Low makes it, and a Vincent and a France doesn't. I think we're still fine with a Fouché in the background and with Tlabakanya as well in the background. I think we're still quite heavy there. If a Bongi can't make it, a Malka can and a Robbi's can. I think Joseph Dwever's a bit of an anomaly that people haven't really thought about for a period of time.
It's been a while. Out of
favor. He could still be in the mix. And you look at the loose heads, Ox probably the oldest of them, really, to be so long in the tooth. But cheapest, man, the strength of that individual is just sublime. And a Steenkamp that can do the hard yards around the park, not just your dominant scrummer. And Tuni that potentially has the ability to be that dominant scrummer. I think if you look at, we're still in a cycle at the moment, and we haven't even seen the Springboks play this year as well. And there are going to be, just to be honest, there are going to be test matches that we're going to be watching this year where we're not going to see an Etzebeth, Malherbe, Bongi Mwambi in the actual starting lineup, even on the bench. I think we're going to see test matches where the likes of the Steenkamp, sort of Grobler, Wilco Low will be starting, or Thomas du Toit, along with a Norkia and a Murat. I think what we've seen in the past, we mustn't necessarily think is going to immediately happen in the future. I mean, Rassie's a very astute man. He's going to mix and match what he thinks might be the right combinations that he can take forward towards the next World Cup. We're in a very different scenario than the rest of the world. England still have no idea who they want to select, even for the Six Nations or the end of year tours coming up. Ireland have a very good idea of who they want, but they have 2 or 3 injuries. A Porter gets injury, the next guy in. They're still using Kian Healy. I mean, that's almost, it's not acceptable, to be honest with you. So where we're going with what we are doing, I think is very well planned and worked out. If you look at what the other nations are doing in this interim, I think a dark horse would be the All Blacks, without the pun intended, because we don't really know what they're doing, but thankfully they're still playing that silly game called Super Rugby. So they're still playing lesser strength. Yeah, exactly. And, if you look at the rest of the nations, Borthwick, I think they could be a real factor the next World Cup. He's still unsure of what he's doing. He's still keeping the older buggers involved, and he's keeping guys that should have retired 3 years ago, part of his starting lineup. So, no, I think between ourselves, New Zealand, which unfortunately don't have the strength of competition that we have, and Ireland and France, there's no question France is still going to be very strong, from where they are right now. I think the World Cup will still be between, ourselves, Ireland, France, and New Zealand. I don't see, I don't really see an England going, wow, we've picked this amazing team that, can do something forceful in the next World Cup.
Yeah, well, maybe England might, but then they would be the only other team that falls outside of that list that you've mentioned. I can't see anyone else really pushing.
Potential.
Yeah.
Potential. When I say that English squad, and look at the youngsters coming through, if they get decent game time in the next 2 years, that England squad and the complement of the England squad could be between 23 and 27, and they could be. I mean, if you look at the individuals, not the collective, because Borthwick hasn't got the collective right yet. The individuals of the players that have the ability to play high-end international rugby, England could mount a very proper squad together. But he's going to have to marry that with, where does Marcus Smith play? Does he drop Marcus Smith, which he's loath to do? Which if you look at Finn Smith, he's a different animal. You probably should have done it last year already. So, no, the England dynamic is quite an interesting one, because the potential for them to put an amazing squad together for a World Cup exists. For Ireland, certainly, definitely exists. France is not even a question; it exists. And South Africa, we can see what Russia's doing already. The depth of squad, the depth of positions that we're putting in. I think he's building. He's not building towards another World Cup. He's building towards winning another World Cup.
Yeah, right. I mean, you speak about Marcus Smith in England, and I always thought that maybe Borthwick should have really given him an extended run at fullback just to try and make space for him in that back line, because he is such a dynamic player. And not to say that he's going to start every match at fullback, but make it a very solid option for selection. The one match I think I'm most looking forward to this year, and I don't know if you agree, Robbi K, 4th of November, South Africa versus France. I think that's going to be one, even for the neutral, to savor, because they're mirroring a lot. They're doing the bomb squad now. They obviously feel like they match in terms of depth and availability of players. They've stopped selecting South African-born players or other foreign-based or born players, and seem to have built up their numbers fundamentally in the last 5 to 7 years. So they certainly, I think, are a threat, and that for me is the biggest test match of the year so far. I know the All Blacks are coming. Yes.
No, listen, I tend to agree with you. I think, listen, Galtier, I think, is probably the number one thing on his entire list this year has been that one test match. The fact that the Six Nations has come and gone, and he's got a few other test matches to worry about. He wants that one test match. He wants it almost to be, this was the World Cup final we never had, which he's going to make it, let's be honest. And I agree with you. I think their strength in depth is very different to ours. Ours are essentially local-born South Africans. There's a lot of what they have in the French environment now are guys that have come across and sort of integrated into the French culture, and they have a number of players from other ethnic backgrounds that really form, I wouldn't say a nucleus, but particularly in their forward pack, a very strong contingent of their forward pack. And they're immense human beings. They're huge specimens like we have in South Africa. So it almost becomes battle of the chess players. And, listen, their biggest loss is their scrum off. We all know that. Our biggest loss could be a Kitsoff. It could be a Marherba. So it's going to be a very interesting test match, that one. And their kicking game is subtly different to ours. The way they counter-attack, subtly different to ours. The way we utilize our forward pack and they utilize theirs. They're almost trying to mirror what we're doing, but they don't quite get it right, which you can't really do. I mean, you've got the magician, that's Rassi. You can't really, mirror what he's doing at any given day in time, because he's always changing things and mixing things up and conjuring something different. So, but still, I think that test match it's almost 2 years down the line. It's almost a World Cup final that should be replayed 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, I can't wait for that one. And, I'm here at Sun City, and one of the reasons I'm here is because there was a little panel with Eben Etzebeth on, and he is a concern for me injury-wise. He doesn't seem to be shaking the effects of this concussion. We've seen it before with Patrick Lambie. I know they're trying to manage him incredibly well, but we also have to make provision for the loss of the likes of an Eben, which is will be a massive loss because he's still young enough, I think, to get to 150 test caps. I just think he can keep going, but for the injury.
Listen, the injury he has, unfortunately, has lifelong effects. It's not, yes, knees and shoulders and backs have the same thing, but having a brain injury as he does have, and still having the circumstances surrounding it, it's something that probably has a bigger impact on you, longer in life and the way life goes. So it's good that he's been managed appropriately. To be honest, if I was in that position, which he is at this present time, would I carry on playing? The thing is that when you're in that position and you're at such a high level consistently for such a long period of time, it's a very difficult decision to say, let's call it quits. And I probably agree with you. I think the guy that's played as much rugby as he had, his impact on the environment when he does play is massive. He's Bucky's Puerto without the guns blazing all the time. So the attrition for a guy like Eben is consistent on every game he plays. There's no kind of game where he can maneuver and manage himself throughout it. It's just attrition on attrition, and the expectation of that attrition is on his shoulders to bear, and just the way he plays the game. He's an invaluable part, as Malherbe, of any Springbok side he's ever played for. So, no, I think I unfortunately tend to agree with you. A guy like that, if we do have him at the next World Cup, we will be extremely lucky.
Yeah. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I do worry about the physical output that he goes through. I mean, the last player I remember going through and thinking, "Oh, you're putting your body through so much," was Schalk Burger, probably Junior, where you just worry about every time he makes contact. I feel the same way about Peter Steph to touch wood, because he also just goes through a mountain of work, and I don't want to see him break down. And the reason I'm saying this is because, one, we're coming to the end of an hour. I can't believe it. Two, I want to wrap up by asking about Rassie's plans. We generally, for those who don't know, the Springboks play an average of 13 test matches a year. He wants to make it 15. But now at the same time, Robbi K, we talk a lot about player welfare. We talk about injuries and minimizing this. And I suppose it speaks to that depth chart that we saw earlier, and wanting to give everybody sufficient opportunity and build the experience and the caps and the rest of it. Sure, 15 test matches is what he's gunning for. Is that too much, given there's still going to be URC, there's still going to be Currie Cup, there's still going to be absolutely everything else, and they only get 8 rounds of a competition off over the course of the year, the Springboks. It's a lot of rugby.
Yeah, Kola, I'm probably going to say one of the most unpopular things on your show ever. The first thing we should do in rugby is get rid of the Currie Cup. We should champion.
Whoa! We are good friends, Robbi Kempson. What are you saying? The oldest rugby competition on the planet, and you're saying scrap it? What?
We should champion it like it should be championed. It was strength versus strength, Springbok versus Springbok. It was the ultimate trial for Test rugby. It's not that anymore. It's a watered down version or whatever it could be. Our Springboks don't play the competition anymore, and we should do it the best favor we can and put it into a pedestal where it deserves to be in SA rugby, and have another competition structure which lends itself to that tier of rugby. But I think at the moment we're harming the Currie Cup by saying it's the Sharks have won the Currie Cup. No, they haven't won the Currie Cup. They've won a watered down version of the Vodacom Cup we used to have back in the day. It's not a full impact URC side playing a full impact URC side, which we do see, which I think should, if they're going to keep the Currie Cup in its present form, then keep that part of the Currie Cup. But if you're talking about the player workload, how to manage players, I think very simply, if Rassie wants to go to 15, there's a very good reason for it. He wants strength in depth. And I think not just Rassie, I think all the nations worldwide want strength in depth, because that's exactly where you get your ultimate elite panel of players from. And right now, probably he's thinking 15 is the elite way to get to his best size that he possibly can get. And I'm saying size because I think he's probably looking at a 3-tier system of how he can
Right.
integrate at least the 6 players World Cup squad into a system where they're consistently playing at a high level, producing an elite level of performance that the Springboks are winning consistently all the time. And I'm not talking about just a Georgia and Italy. I'm talking about Australia, New Zealand, Argentina. And he comes from, his Rusty's mindset is very unique. He's always forward thinking. He's thinking about things that we're going to think about next year. He's already thought about 2 years ago. So there's a very specific reason he's looking for that ultimate that he wants. And I think the management of players, and Ireland get it right because they're centrally contracted and they can manage their players. To a lesser degree, South African rugby players are. But, to play URC, Currie Cup and everything else with it, our players can't achieve that. They need a break. And I think, because now with the Northern Hemisphere, sadly, let's park the Currie Cup and let's, if there's another domestic competition that we need to use, let's utilize that effectively for the other people that need to play the game. But let's give Rassie his 50 or 55 elite players on a consistent basis. And what's best for SA Rugby should always be the ultimate. Not what's best for the franchises. They always want that because they want to perform. And also they've got sponsors and investors they want to keep happy. But ultimately, if the Bok is championed and the Bok is winning, rugby in South Africa is winning.
But we are about to wrap up, and I can't let you go without discussing schools rugby. We saw the start of the North-South rugby tournament. I think that's 200 schools across the country who are involved in that. It's a massive tournament. We're heading into Easter schools. And there was one result in particular that stood out for me over the past weekend, and it was one where Kes got beaten by 100 points.
One of you produced the red boy. I mean, careful.
Yes, I know. And he's a Welshman. I mean, it's like double whammy. So we're not going to laugh at you, Paul. Sorry about that. I was expecting to hear his voice from the depth of the computer. But the question... There you go. It's... we should. Football as well. I'm a Manchester United supporter. It's really tough to support anyone in a red jersey. And the Lions got walloped as well last weekend. So maybe we're onto something here. But I wonder about the benefit of a score like that for young men, for a 17-year-old, for an 18-year-old. Should there be some sort of a cap? In terms of the score or the margin? Should there be, I don't know, Kempo, what do you make of it? Or is it a growth opportunity, a learning opportunity? You deal with these young guys. If they were to take 100 points against someone, I feel like it could destroy their confidence.
It's a balancing act, to be honest with you. It's, it's semi-professional, to be honest with you, the way schoolboy rugby has gone. It's every first team has a variety of coaches. They've got people that look after the system. Schools are getting big sponsors to it. To be honest with you, you go back to the Currie Cup. Schoolboy games are getting 10, 15,000 people. Currie Cup's getting 500. So it's really a niche of the game, and I think is probably untouched when it comes to broadcasting and the way that it's broadcast through our various platforms. And I think the Cares one's a very unfortunate one. You don't ever want to see that to any team, to be honest with you. But it also just shows the margins of having a team that's slightly off. When I say slightly off, and a team that's really on their game. When you're playing some of these big schools, your Greyblooms, your Paul Russes, your Paul Chims, your Paul Boys. Listen, there are numerous others. Rondebosch, for instance, a Sachs, a Weinberg. If you're slightly off these guys potentially can give you a proper smack, which they've done. Another one that people probably haven't even heard of is Durbanville, that are pretty much a strong ass now as well. Stellenberg, you look at that score as well. And these are just Cape Town schools. I'm not even going to playing in a Waterkloof, etc. So the schoolboy rugby in South Africa is tremendously competitive, and do I think it's a good thing? Yes, to a certain extent, I do. I think a lot of the reason why our franchises and our Springbok sides are so prominent is guys that come out of a schoolboy system playing in such big crowds and with that pressure on them handle it a lot better when they get into a professional setup. There's no question they do. Instead of coming from a private school system in England when they're taking 5 years to develop to go, oh, well, we're playing against a crowd of 5,000. They think it's a big crowd. So it benefits South African rugby in the long run, yeah. Is it too much on a level? Potentially, yes. A score of 102-0, does the referee get or allowed to stop that game? I would think that there should be a level of professionalism from both sides saying, where does the buck stop? And certainly perhaps should start with, the side that's winning as opposed to the side that's losing. Is there a lesson to be learned from 102? No, I very much doubt it at a schoolboy level. I don't think there is. And I think in certain circumstances, and I've seen this live myself with the likes of a Grey Bloom, where they get to a certain point in the game and they go, that's enough for the day. So, yes, there must be a measure, to be honest with you, when it comes to schoolboys. And, if you couple all of that about schoolboy rugby, they still have the pressures of social media. They still have all the pressures the professionals have. But they don't have the buck in the bank, do they? But they certainly get it with regards to supporters and all boys and. So it's a tremendous amount of pressure that's heaped on them without giving them a really, a score that's so disproportionate to the way that they're actually trying to play on the field of play. So, yes, there's got to be a measure somewhere amongst the teams, amongst the referees and, the coaches where enough is enough. But certainly, again, Carlo, if you look at the teams, and I'll just mention Western Cape teams, if you look at the teams around the country, a team like Cares themselves have been, top 12, top 14 in the country, have been a very difficult side to beat. And just sometimes you get that anomaly where things go wrong, unfortunately. So, but yeah, our schoolboy rugby in South Africa is, I'll give you the perfect. We had guys from Hurst Pierpoint, which is quite a good rugby school over in England. They came across to play for us, and they've never played in front of 10,000 people in their lives. It was the best experience they've ever had in their lives, and they went back to Hurst and played in front of 300. And they just said the experience they had just playing for us for those couple of months was just next level, and what they learned and how they progressed in their careers. One's managed to now play for the Netherlands. Might seem like a small thing, but it's a big thing in their context. But we have an unbelievable schoolboy infrastructure in South African rugby, which I think lends itself to the competitiveness that we have, particularly when we're going up the ranks to S under 20 and to the Springboks. And would I counter that with any other we currently have? Probably not. But certainly when it comes to big scores, like you mentioned, there's got to be a release valve somewhere where someone says enough's enough.
Yeah, before the gremlins completely ruin the show, Kempo, and I do want to let you go. I promise I want to let you go. What do you tell, last question, what do you tell a team that's just taken 102 points of youngsters? How do you turn it around?
That's a bit of a tricky question. Depends on the environment, completely on who the individuals are, where they're at, are they grade 11s, are they grade 12s, what they've done in their previous years, because that tends to lend a lot to what they might do. So if you look at this year's grade 12s are meant to be the COVID years that really are coming through. So it's a tough one. Listen, the most important thing I think about rugby in general, and this is for professionals, non-professional schoolboy players, man, you've got to enjoy it. So if you're not enjoying it and there's an element of, that thing in your gut where you're going, this is not for me, that's the time when you're going to be improving or doing something in rugby. And that's as a coach, as a player, as backroom staff, it doesn't matter who it is. There's got to be a level of enthusiasm where, I want to do this day in, day out, or I want to give this a crack this weekend. We put that game behind us. We've got, say, Jeppe or Sicilians next. and how do we appreciate, going into that battle, and which bits of the puzzle can we improve upon, and which can we discard and say definitely didn't work. It's a bit of a process, particularly for young oaks, and particularly when you have old boys and all the other conundrums that come with it. But if you're not enjoying the game you're playing, you're not enjoying rugby, and I'm talking about from grassroots level all the way through. The biggest thing for me is having fun out there, and it doesn't matter of the level of competitiveness. If you're having fun, you're ticking a box, and that's what counts.
Kempo, thanks so much for that. What an absolute privilege. What a pleasure to have you imparting some of this knowledge. And we always talk about the dark arts of the front row and scrums. Really interesting to find out a little bit more about why it is we see this dominance from a South African and particularly a Springbok point of view, and the role Don Heeman plays in it as well. Thinking maybe next week we'll go with a back, maybe a fly half. I don't know. You'll have to catch us same time next week, Thursday, 7 o'clock. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and more than anything, share with your friends, especially those that you know want to hear this kind of content. Get in touch. Let us know what other content, maybe what other guests you'd like to see on that Rugby Union Show. I'm Kola. Cheers.
Thanks, man. Cheers.